We're going to get started. Bryan Harris, with Implementation Coordinator with Maryland Department of Agriculture. Now we're going to get into the nutrient management regulations and so forth. It's what you're all learning about, to write nutrient management plans, or at least be familiar with the regulations and so forth, and hopefully going to go forward and get certified and everything. So we'll get started here. This just gives you a little bit of the timeline of the nutrient management program back when it started in 1989 and so forth, when it was a voluntary nutrient management program. And then as we came down the line here, back in here in 1998 was when we had the Water Quality Improvement Act, and that's when nutrient management in Maryland went from a voluntary status into a regulated, mandated program and so forth. And then it has evolved since then. There was the regulations were completed from the initial Water Quality Improvement Act, and there were some amendments to the regulations, Nutrient Management Summit. Like everything else, there's public comments and things that happen with regulations and stuff. So over time, they get tweaked a little bit and adjusted due to that political process and so forth. And December of '09 was when the MDE general permit for the AFOs took effect, which kind of started the AFO program and the CAFO program. And CAFO is concentrated animal feeding operation and so forth. AFO is animal feeding operation with MDE. That program is run by MDE. However, MDA does have a part in that. They still are regulated by MDA's nutrient management program as well. We do kind of coordinate with MDE and stuff with our annual implementation report and so forth as we go forward here. 2011 was the Fertilizer Use Act. That brought more into the urban nutrient management program. That expanded the urban nutrient management program and so forth. Then there were some nutrient application adjustments. The phosphorus management tool went into effect in 2015. The nutrient application requirements, again, were amended and adjusted, so forth. And then in 2019, there was a the actual nutrient management law was amended. It had to do with administrative penalties and reporting. And in 2020, the urban nutrient management program was amended with a tweak to the law. It was a minor change. And then in May of 22, there were some nutrient management regulations that are amended for the urban program as well as for the ag side of things. But it's just a timeline, progression of timeline. Again, mentioned the Water Quality Improvement Act of 1998. This is what created the nutrient management law in the state of Maryland due to the outbreaks of Listeria and stuff and on the Chesapeake Bay and the Eastern Shore, so forth. The legislation required all farm operators that met certain criteria, they needed to have a mandated nutrient management plan for their operation. All right. The actual article, the agricultural article, the law itself is Ag Article 8-801 to 8.807. All right. In that, from the law, then gets created the regulations. All right. So we call that COMAR, which is Code of Maryland Regulations. And in that, we have several chapters of regulation in the nutrient management part. We're going to cover certification and licensing, fertilizer application requirements, ag operations, and the plan content. This 15-2010 is all the urban ag requirements and what the urban ag has to do. They have to be have certified applicators and so forth to be able to apply to turf grass. Companies have to be certified and licensed to be able to apply to turf grass and so forth. So if you hire a lawn company to take care of your lawn or something, make sure they're certified. Check our website and see if they're certified and or licensed and so forth. But anyway, we'll continue to talk about the ag side. Again, you got all these in handouts, so I'm going to try to go through some of these pretty quickly. For certification and licensing, again, this is going to apply to individuals and businesses that actually prepare the nutrient management plans for folks. The idea behind the nutrient management plan is management of essential primary nutrients. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are your primaries. Again, we want to manage for optimal crop production while protecting water quality and so forth. All right. And in these plans, they contain your crop yields, your existing nutrient levels in your soils from your soil test, any residuals, organic residuals. You know, you've heard all about biosolids now and manures and food processing residuals and so forth. That all falls under this organics. We want to make sure we're placing these nutrients out there at the right timing and placement. And then there's other BMPs out there that come into play, your liming, your tillage, crop rotation, etc., and so forth. Again, for definitions, we're going to refer you to the regulations to look up terms and definitions and so forth. But the one that I'll pick here is just crop nutrient needs, means the primary nutrient requirements of a crop determined as pounds of N, P, and K. All right, so you're going to come up with a recommendation for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium when you write that nutrient management plan, for example. All right. So when we talk about the requirements here, we want to cover the fact that an individual may not act as a certified consultant unless they're certified by the department. That would be the Maryland Department of Agriculture. A person may not engage in the business of writing the plan unless they're licensed by the department. All right. Now, we do have a category for certified farm operators. They can write their own nutrient management plans if they get certified to do that. So we do have a certification requirement for that, and they don't have to be licensed at that point in time for their own operation. And that broke.
Is it not going?
All right. So we want to submit. We have the nutrient management applications and things. We want to submit our application forms to MDA 15 days before the exam. So we're going to try to get an announcement up on the exam. Hopefully, it says we have to do at least 30 days ahead of the exam. So hopefully we're going to have it up by mid-June. As my goal is that we get that thing lined up and so forth. You have to show proof of education and experience. It's an application. You know, you basically got to show your employment and things like that, and what your education level and stuff is on that exam. Again, there's a fee for that, $50 fee, except for a government agency or government employees. And then if you're a farm operator, it's a one-time payment for farm operators in that situation. And then we have our timely application as required, you know. Yep, up there right now. All right. Once a year, we announce it 30 days. Again, we got to put that out there. We're hoping to get that up by mid-June. That way, at least it's on the website and everybody can look at it. For the folks that are here, we will try to email that to you. Whether you sign up or not, it's your choice, but we'll try to email you the application since we got all your emails and stuff through registration and so forth. All right. Again, we try to provide some education training and list of study materials and so forth. You're here for the fundamentals. You're getting that. There's other things on the University of Maryland website, study materials and so forth, practice questions and things like that, which I'm sure everybody's going to talk about in a little bit here. You are allowed, if something happens and you don't get through the first time, you can certainly retake it and so forth by resubmitting the application and the fee. All right. There's other, we do offer required training and certification for farm operators for specific types of operations. We've kind of broadened out a little bit over the time, at least once a year. All right. So, as you certify as a consultant or a certified farm operator, you have to meet the regulatory requirements of the chapter, satisfy the MDA educational and experience, the training requirements, and then you pass the exam. All right. Again, as a consultant, as far as employment requirements, as a consultant must be licensed or employed by other licensed company or a person if you engage in the business of writing a plan. So you have to be licensed and you have to employ somebody that's certified. okay, is what it boils down to. All right? Certified consultants are farm operators that are only writing for their own farm operation, don't need a business license. Okay? So. All right. Okay. This is what gets a little confusing for folks, so I'm just going to try to go through it here. Okay.
I'll click through.
We initially issue your certification for 1 year. So when you take your test and you pass it, your certification will be issued for 1 year up front. Okay? After that period of time, then you will get renewal notices, and it will renew every 3 years after that when you do the fee. So I kind of say the first year is kind of like your initial period, probationary type period. It's not termed that, but I'm just throwing it out there in terms of an explanation. So, when you get the renewal notice, again, except for government agencies, then it would be $150. Remember the exam, the first one is only $50. So, when you renew for the 3 years, then it picks up for the rest of that and becomes $150. Now, when you renew, you would need 12 hours of continuing education units every 3 years for consultants, 6 for certified farm operators. So in your first year, you would need to get what we tell certified farm operators is they need 2 credits, and for consultants they would need the 6 credits. So you would have to get 6 credits to renew that first year. So it's half of the 3-year period. All right, and of course comply with the requirements of the preparing nutrient management plans and record keeping and so forth. And then, of course, you know, wouldn't be regulations if we didn't remind you failure to renew on time may require you to retake the exam. Okay. So again, a license application, you submit that to MDA, you pay the appropriate fee. If you're a corporation, it's $100. If you're an individual, it's $50. And you have to have at least 1 certified person under you, and so forth. And you agree to comply with the chapter requirements when you do that. All right. It's issued for 1 year and then renews every 3 years after that. Again, it's $150 for that 3-year period. Now, they're not going to ask you what the prices are on the exam or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about that. Maintain. Again, you have to have that active consultant and comply with the requirements of the chapter.
I'll click it.
All right. Again, as a license holder, once you have a license to write nutrient management plan, you have a consultant that's working for you, there's a responsibility to fill out an annual activity report, and basically that report is due September 30th. We mail that out to you, and it covers the previous year. It covers July 1 to June 30th, so it covers a fiscal year, basically, of the previous year. And again, you would fill that out, answering basically how many acres you wrote nutrient management plans for, what watersheds they were in, and so forth, whether they were new or updated, and that type of thing. Also, you do need to keep, as a license holder, you do need to keep your records of your nutrient management plans and make them available upon request to MDA. You need to keep those plans for 5 years. Okay. So, if we get into a situation where there's a denial, a suspension, or a revocation, there's an opportunity for a hearing before the department, and usually these violations are because of providing misleading information when applying for a certificate, misleading or false fraudulent reporting, offering or preparing plans without a certificate or license, preparing a plan not meeting the regulatory requirements, no certified consultant working, and that's, you know, failure to report or allow MDA access for inspection and or meeting continuing education requirements. Very little do we have to deal with this side of things. As long as you're, you know, working with us, we try to work with you. All right? If, in the end, if something were to happen, if you're denied, suspended, or revoked the certificate, they may require you to retake the certification exam. frankly, I've taken that exam. I don't want to take it again, but I'm not trying to scare anybody, but it is an exam that you do need to study for. All right? So, we're going to shift gears from the certificate consultants and stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about our commercial fertilizer application requirements and so forth, and voucher requirements for operators and so forth. So if anybody applies nutrients to greater than 10 acres of ag land owned or managed, they have to have either a voucher, which is good for 3 years, be a certified consultant or certified operator, or hire a certified consultant. So if somebody's got ag land and it's more than 10 acres, the operator, if they're applying the nutrients themselves, they would need the voucher and so forth. If they're doing for hire, then it would have to have a certified consultant be involved in that and so forth. Again, when you're doing agricultural land for hire, you have to hire a certified nutrient management consultant. So in other words, if you're purchasing from a commercial company or something, typically they have certified nutrient management planners on staff or someone that has the certification that would then be involved in the supervision of their folks and their applicators and so forth, because the nutrient applications need to be applied according to the nutrient management plan. All right? So that's where that comes into. All right, that's all right. Basically, we get into denial, suspension. It's the same type of thing. You can, if you fail to supervise your nutrient applications, fail to meet the educational requirements, providing misleading information, you can get a appeal process through the secretary of the department and so forth. Again, not something we have had to go through at this point. So, this is the nuts and bolts of who needs a plan and so forth. We're talking about the agriculture operation requirements here. All right. So anyone who applies to a farm or agricultural operator and requires the operator to develop a nutrient management plan and implement it on an NMP-based nutrient management plan for their operation. All right. The law required that when it was passed. The Water Quality Improvement Act required that. So again, an agricultural operation means a business or activity that tills, crops, keeps pastures, produces agricultural products, including livestock, poultry, plants, sod, food, feed, fiber, by in-ground or out-of-ground container or other culture, and has a gross annual income of $2,500 or more, or has 8 animal units or more. So there was some talk about animal units already, and animal units equal to 1,000 pounds of live weight. So, if the operator meets 2,500 but doesn't have the animals, they need a nutrient management plan. If they don't meet 2,500 but they have the 8 animals, they need a nutrient management plan. It doesn't take much anymore to get $2,500 gross income and so forth to need a nutrient management plan. All right? So it's either or of those two things that would require you to have a plan. It's not, you don't have to have both. It's one or the other, or both would require. Is there any questions on that? All right. So, in your bag, you should have gotten a green flash drive. And on that flash drive is going to be what's known as the Maryland Nutrient Management Manual. All right? And in that book is a whole bunch of things, all the recommendations, for example, from the University of Maryland for the different crops and different things that we have. It's also going to contain the nutrient application requirements. That's something you're going to want to become familiar with and be very aware of if you're going to be writing nutrient management plans. All right? So, plan development, these dates are long past, long gone, but back when the law was passed, you know, they required everybody to have NMP based by December 31st, 2001, implemented by 2002. Biosolids and manure, again, N-based by December of 01, implemented by 02. Then it went to NMP based by July 1 of 04, implemented by 05. Bottom line is we're here. We got to deal with nitrogen and phosphorus both as we're going forward. Plans must be prepared by the certified consultant to meet the implementation deadline, need to meet all aspects of the operation, all right? So if somebody's a large crop operation, but yet they have 2 horses standing in a field, those 2 horses need to be in that nutrient management plan as well, because it's part of the operation, all right?
You have 2 LLC numbers on the same ground. Do they operate under 2 different nutrient management?
If they're 2 different operations, they would operate under 2 different nutrient management plans.
Okay, so I got dad cropping with one business, son raising hogs with another.
Yeah, yeah, so that would technically be, unless they're jointly going together and saying they're gonna do things together. I mean, it sounds like they've set it up that they're individual. All right, let's see. Again, we want to address all and identify all management and disposition of all primary nutrients produced, imported, and exported. So we have to account for all that within the nutrient management plan and need to address the manure management for the entire operation. Again, the plan shall be based on COR 152008, and then in that there's update requirements as well for when a nutrient management plan has to be updated. A nutrient management plan is valid for a maximum of 3 years. There are certain conditions and a lot of manure. If you've got a lot of manure in the operation, they may update those nutrient management plans yearly. Just because, can you tell me 3 years from now where you're going to be putting that manure? It's a little hard sometimes, and the weather gets in the way and everything else. So there are general update requirements in there if a crop rotation is changed. Soil test indicates a change in recommendations. Again, the soil tests are valid for 3 years. Acreage managed changes 10% or 30 acres, whichever is less. Any animal units change 10% or greater, and there's a significant manure production. You know, I say if you got 10 head of cattle standing out there, which means you got 10 animal units, and you sell 1, I'm not as concerned about you updating that nutrient management plan as you may be if you have 200 head and you start selling off 30 head of animal or something. You know, you're going to have a difference in your manure production at that point in time. All right. So there's required plan content, the plan identification, initial plan reporting form for somebody that's new to the department and so forth. We still run into them. We still have farms that are, you know, changing hands. We have farms that subdivide and sell off smaller pieces, and you know, we're getting some smaller farms each time. In fact, that's a bigger push for the department, is dealing with these smaller farm operations and so forth as time goes on. It's going to have your farm operator information, location, plan information, consultant information, etc. The map and aerial photograph showing the location, boundaries, acreage, and so forth. Soil tests not more than 3 years old, and then a summary of nutrient recommendations for the fields, for all your fields and management units that you have. Just as a reminder, even if you don't have animals, but you have a pasture, you still have to soil sample. Even if you have animals and all the manure is uncollected and you don't put any nutrients on it, you still have to do a soil sample of that pasture. Okay? All the fields are required once every 3 years. All right. So, you want to look at the field and management unit specific. We're talking about the date that the recommendations were prepared, the account IDs. These account IDs are property tax assessment numbers that you can get off of the tax bills, or you can look them up by the address. There's websites out there that you can certainly look up account IDs and so forth. Watershed codes for the management unit, the acreage, soil analysis, expected crop yield, kind of the whole laundry list of what goes into that field or management unit page in your nutrient management plan. Again, plan maintenance information. We need to see that how long that plan is good for. So when you write that plan, you want to write it for a specific time period and indicate that in your cover letter. Circumstances that may change in the operation. These are kind of the update things again. If you add a new farm to the operation, you have to go in and update or at least amend the nutrient management plan and include that new farm and so forth. And then your BMPs for achieving optimal fertility. All right. We get into the nutrient rates. They need to be consistent with the MDA technical standards and criteria. That's that nutrient management manual I was talking about. So that's where you're going to find those maximum rates is in that nutrient management manual and so forth. Also, the University of Maryland has software referred to as Newman Pro and so forth. That also has all the recommendations in, and it will give you the maximum that you could put on. Again, when you write your plans, in most cases, you're going to be basing it off your yields and so forth for the crops that use it. Certainly going to take that into consideration, any organics and stuff, but you're going to give the operator in the end, what is he or she allowed to put on as a maximum rate of nutrients at that point in time. All right. Your expected crop yield or production goal, again, there's several methods here. The average of the 3 highest yielding years out of the last 5 consecutive. If you have more than 5 years of information, you can use an average of 60% of the highest yielding years. If you have no records, then you can use the web soil survey and use productivity data that's online through the web soil survey and so forth. I would prefer you be using these. These are going to be typically more accurate than the web soil survey. So by now most people are keeping some sort of records out there, especially if they're reporting anything through FSA and so forth. Soil analysis needs to be done for each management unit based on the standard soil test labs acceptable to the MDA. Again, they're valid for 3 years with some exceptions and justifications. There's some provisions in the regs that you may use a plan longer than 3 years on certain situations. I'm not going to get into that, and that part's not on the test. All right? That's stuff you'll learn as you write your plans, as you get further into this. All right? Determining the limited nutrient. If your soil fertility is less than 150 FIV, you can use a nitrogen base for your plant needs. If you're greater than 150, you have to, not only do you have to run the phosphorus management tool, you've got to follow what its recommendations come out with in terms of determining your nutrient rate of phosphorus and so forth. All right? And you're going to hear a little bit more about that yet today. Okay. All right, required plant content, natural organic fertilizers. All right, that's a term in the regs. Again, that captures a lot of things: manure, biosolids, food processing residuals, anything organic at that point in time. Needs to have a nutrient analysis at least once per year. The analysis must be done as close to nutrient application as possible. Baseline or book value can be used under certain circumstances. Depending on the size of the operation, we've got some policies that go into that and so forth. Method of nutrient application, again, we want to minimize our NP losses, take into account techniques for accurate and uniform application, recommend split application and on soils with high leaching potentials and so forth. We should always be recommending split applications when we start talking about nitrogen and stuff. You've heard Paul talk about how quickly the losses from nitrogen are and so forth. Nutrient application requirements, again, we want to talk about that being as close to plant uptake as possible, consistent with the nutrient management manual, which is on your flash drive, and your setbacks and so forth, and temporary stockpiling of organics, which we're going to talk about real soon here. Back in 2012, when the nutrient application requirements were amended, that's when these setbacks were put in and they were phased in and so forth. Again, nutrient application setback means a vegetated area of prescribed width where nutrient-containing material may not be applied, as measured from the edge of surface water, including perennial and intermittent streams. All right? You can see the definition there on your page of the intermittent stream. All right, ephemeral streams does it not include? We talk about ephemeral streams, which are defined, which flow only in direct response to precipitation, all right, in an immediate watershed. So if we go out, I think, they're talking late tonight or something about rain, and if we have something flowing tomorrow morning, but by tomorrow, Friday, it's gone, we're not requiring that to have a setback on it, okay? Irrigation and treatment ditches, field ditches, which for this purpose of this exception are defined as channelized waterways that as provided in USDA, NRCS, National Cooperative Soil Survey are not within these things here, floodplain, soil map unit, hydrant soil, and soil mapping unit that has a B slope or steeper, all right? So those wouldn't require setbacks. All right, remember I said the setbacks were phased in, so we have an application using broadcast methods such as a spinner or splasher requires a 35-foot setback. So if you're just out there broadcasting it on, you gotta have a 35-foot setback in place. A directed spray, application, or injection of crop nutrients require a 10-foot setback. Accepting perennial forage crops grown for hay and pasture, vegetation in the 10-foot setback area may not contain the crop plants, so there needs to be something different to show that setback. If you've got a cornfield, then your 10-foot area is probably some sort of grass or something like that potentially. All right. Pastures and hay fields are subject to that setback area as well. Nutrients may not be applied mechanically within the setback, except as provided in 2B6, and the livestock shall be excluded from the setback to prevent direct deposition of nutrients within the setback. So in layman's terms, what's that mean?
Setback nutrient-wise or your animals.
You gotta have some sort of fence in place to keep the animals out of that 10-foot area. All right? Now, they did put provisions in place as an alternative fencing livestock setback area. A person shall work with your soil conservation district to develop and implement a soil conservation water quality plan with BMPs such as stream crossing, alternative water facilities, pasture management, or other MDA approved BMPs. All right? So there are some situations, like if you have a very large pasture and a very small number of animals, you may not have to fence the stream, okay? Typically, that's not the situation we get into most of the time. But, if you work with your soil conservation district and they come up with a plan and so forth that says, hey, we don't think you need stream fencing here, and they put it in the conservation plan, then we'll live with it as long as it works. If it doesn't work, then we'll have to, at that point in time, we'll have to look at some other alternatives, and we may still have to put a fence up. All right? But as long as it works, that's fine. Now, there are things you can do. You can, your fence doesn't have to be all engineered. It can be electric fence. It can be polywire. It just depends on what type of animals you have and what your animals would respect. All right? There are, as an alternative for future MDA may approve other BMPs that it finds equally protective of water quality and stream health. And again, all the partners would be involved, USDA, University of Maryland, etc., determining that. All right? At this point, the main thing that most people are having to fence their streams because there aren't too many alternatives to them. All right? Sacrifice lots, less than 75% grass and lagoon mix, shall maintain a 35-foot setback from surface waters. Okay. Basically, there's a chart in there that kind of describes, hey, if I'm a natural or either perennial or intermittent stream, setbacks apply. If I'm channelized and perennial and I fall within these things, then a setback would apply. Channelized and intermittent ditch does not apply. Ephemeral, natural, or channelized ditch does not apply. So you wouldn't require that. So it just kind of gives you that overview. And then there's the chart in there, or the diagram. We got our 10-foot, no application, no nutrient application area. From our 10 out to 35 feet. This is our directed nutrient application area, so we can run our planters, our airflows, our spray rigs, all that stuff in here up to this 10-foot mark. All right. If we're doing broadcast spreading, then we're out here on this past this 35-foot mark. All right. There is a nutrient application setback template on our website for including in your nutrient management plans. You can include those in there. Again, we prefer if you actually show it on the map to the operators and actually show that on a map. But this also gives you the opportunity to list it right in the cover letter, and whether you need a 10-foot or so forth, and what you need there, and to be able to describe that. So basically, you identify the fields that need a setback in the nutrient management plan. That is the responsibility of the certified person writing the nutrient management plan, to work with the operator and let them know that, hey, you do need a setback here. All right? All right. So I want to talk about our nutrient application timing. We want to start talking about spring, summer, March to September 9th. For our chemical organic fertilizers allowed for an existing crop or crop to be planted. You're going to pick up on a theme here that all those applications must be in accordance with the new Maryland Nutrient Management Manual, again, which is on your flash drive. Organic fertilizers shall be injected or incorporated within 48 hours except direct deposit of livestock, permanent pastures, hay production, operators who choose to use no-till farming practices. A lot of people stay away from highly erodible land if they can. That seems to be operational defined. You know, farmers decide what they want to do in those situations. All right. Land with crops receiving spray irrigation as well. All right. Organic fertilizers, we talked about fall, September 10th to December 15th. You heard a little bit about that this morning in Craig's talk. We're allowed for an existing crop or a crop to be planted in the fall or the following spring. It gets a little tricky in spots. The application must be in accordance with the Nutrient Management Manual. Again, need to be injected or incorporated within 48 hours, except as the same exceptions that were in the spring. Applications may be applied to fallow land, but a cover crop needs to be planted as soon as possible after application. Nutrient management regulations currently say that if you apply on fallow land in the fall, you have to have that cover crop planted by the 15th of November. All right? And again, those applications have to be in accordance with the Nutrient Management Manual. Now, when you get into applying on an existing crop, you already got something growing there, or going to have something growing there, such as small grains. A lot of times we get into fallow ground, we're looking at the next year's crop that we're dealing with, so that we can get our manure pits and stuff like that emptied out before the winter time when you can't apply nutrients. Again, nutrient application rates have been determined based on the Nutrient Management Manual by either an N and P-based criteria. For P-based, fall crops shall be based on P recommendations. For spring crops not to exceed 1 year phosphorus removal rate, you have to follow PMT provisions. If your soils are greater than 150, we're not going to allow you to put on more than 50 pounds of plant available nitrogen in the fall if you're working on that P-based plant. So it's kind of whichever one you're going to bump into first. If you hit the P removal rate before the 50 pounds, your application rate stops there. If you hit the nitrogen, the 50-pound pan rate before your phosphorus removal rate, you're limited there. So there is a limit on what you can do in the fall. All right. There is an N-based portion of that, again following the Nutrient Management Manual. But again, for the other crop, if you're looking ahead to spring, you can only go up to the 50-pound plant available nitrogen based on what and that phosphorus removal part. If you get into emergency situations with storage and things, then we always refer everybody to consult our nutrient management specialists in the regional offices and so forth. especially when we get into winter time, which is defined December 16th to February 28th. No winter application of chemical fertilizer to cropland except any green up and tillering begins for small grain, perennial forage crops as outlined by the nutrient management manual. Now, typically what that means is the department, you can't go out before February 15th because that's in regulation. But if the department, if the growing degrees have been met, the department has been known to let people start top dressing small grains before March 1st, based on the growing degree days of those crops. So that's kind of determined on a yearly basis based on the weather. All right. Certain nutrients for greenhouse production, vegetable and small fruits are listed in the nutrient management manual, can have nutrients at that time of the year, but it has to be in accordance with the nutrient management manual. There has to be a recommendation there. And then, of course, K or lining materials. All right. When we talk about organic fertilizer application to cropland, provided there's inadequate storage capacity that will be exceeded before March 1, it's non-stackable and no other reasonable way to manage it. We always run into an emergency situation. Something happens, or we get too much rain or something and the pit fills up before winter's up. That's when you have to manage your application not only in accordance with the nutrient management manual, but you need to contact MDA's nutrient management program and basically, make sure you got all the information you need to do that. We basically have to call us and let us know so we know what's going on. Typically anymore, complaints are very easy now. People ride around, they're getting more familiar with what folks have to do. So if they see you out there applying on snow, it's a big giveaway. All right. And a lot of times if they see somebody out in the middle of winter, they know you're not supposed to be out there, so they end up calling you anyway. So we've been telling folks to give us a call, let us know what's going on. That way, when that complaint comes in, we already know about it. We can save a lot of time and trouble. All right. So in the winter, if it's an emergency situation only, you would have to follow these requirements. So it's got to be an emergency situation. There's no other reason to be out there. All right. Again, if it's stackable, less than 60%, you can't do anything anyway. If it's saturated, snow-covered ground greater than an inch, or hard frozen greater than 2 inches. All right. Slope greater than 7%. You can't apply on a slope greater than 7%. Your rates of application need to be minimized, and we need to use the most available acreage we can use to the greatest extent practical. Again, we can't exceed this 50 pounds of plant available. Nitrogen or phosphorus removal rates, and any winter applied nutrients are deducted from your next harvested crop, 1 for 1. That's in the nutrient management regulations. That if in an emergency situation you have to go out in winter, we're taking off the N and the P and stuff off your recommendations, or at least the N off your recommendation in the spring. So it is kind of a deterrent to make sure you get your storage in place and so forth, and have enough storage to get through the winter. Because based on what you've learned here today, nitrogen is pretty volatile and it gets away quick. All right. The setback increases as well from all surface waters up to 100 feet at that point in time if there's any applications in the winter time. Potassium and liming materials and manure directly deposited by livestock doesn't count. And again, there's certain nutrients for greenhouse production, vegetable crops, small fruit crops, etc. Temporary field stockpiling, just general provisions. If you don't have enough storage available to you and your material is stackable, you can stack it in the field or field stage it in the field, as long as you're following the guidelines. Again, that provides better protection than full winter application of nutrients and so forth ahead of the normal planting period. You need to use all your existing storage facilities prior to stockpiling in the field. All right? We see this, it does happen. We got all these new heavy use area with manure structures on the ends of them and different things and so forth. They're not meant to store your straw and your hay and bedding material. It's meant to store manure, all right? Those facilities have to be used prior to stockpiling out in the field. You know, if we're over on the shore, we don't want to see the chicken manure sitting out on a pile and the combine parked in the storage shed. All right? Has it happened? Yes, it's happened. Right. So, existing storage needs to be used fully before doing this. All right? Any material staged in the field or stockpile shall be land applied the first spring following placement of the pile. So if I place my pile this fall, clean out my barns, I have to apply it next spring. I can't just sit on it and let it accumulate. I have to apply it. All right? And those materials shall be field stockpiled or staged temporarily in a manner that prevents nutrient runoff, etc. There's a little more detail in those documents in the nutrient management manual and so forth. There is an out-of-ground production section of COMAR 152008. We talk about out-of-ground production like our nursery greenhouse operations and so forth. They have a little bit different requirements, you know, about listing your plant numbers and plants grown in category sizes and total growing area, listing all their nutrient sources and quantities to be applied, description of their application methods, environmental risk assessment, and general management recommendations for equipment calibration, timing, and so forth. Again, for specifics, they can group plants based, you know, monitoring water and nutrient needs, reduce nutrient leachate, water containment. So there's some of the specific management recommendations that should be in that plan. They need to have a program for monitoring their runoff if they're greater than a zero risk on the risk assessment that they have to do. Their planned maintenance update requirements are just a little bit different. You got it there. Again, their recommendations are based on the label and the fertilizer, University of Maryland recommendations. We have had to take recommendations for other states and research data from other universities and so forth to work with those operations. And of course, general nutrition guidelines and similar plants, all right? They have to do an environmental risk assessment. They got to maintain a zero or low risk category. If they're greater than that, then they have to identify specific BMPs to reduce that risk and so forth. And again, they have to have time period for monitoring and so forth and sampling the water. They have to do some EC monitoring and so forth and do 2 samples per year. It all comes out in the environmental risk assessment on those operations. And those plans and those courses are offered by John Lee Cox and Andrew Risky from the University of Maryland. So if you get into some of those situations, or if you think you want to write plans for a nursery greenhouse, I do advise that you touch base with one of those guys and get signed up for one of their courses to go through it. It is a little bit different world than the traditional corn, beans, wheat situation.
Do you know if that would be beneficial if you're going through your CCA? Would that be?
The exam you're going to take for the 5th is going to go towards your CCA.
Right, but taking that specific...
It's going to be beneficial to you as writing plans and probably would help, with some things. I'm not sure whether the CCA gets too deep into nursery greenhouse plants or not.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't think it'll count for the nutrient management piece of
That
it.
No,
But this, this.
The August
exam
5th
you'll be
test
taking
will.
Yeah,
That
well, I
will
think
count.
it's required to take this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's the part of it that they're going to cover.
Okay.
So, talking about the test, the exam date will be August 5th, starting at 9 a.m. It'll probably be down here somewhere. The other thing is usually in this exam, we try to get some locations across the state, like maybe Washington County, Easton, and here, so that maybe everybody doesn't have to travel, and maybe probably going to we've done some outdoor locations in that situation where we could just do the test at picnic tables and stuff like that, and be outside, as things, continue to go. Who knows, we'll see where it is, hopefully COVID won't be a problem for us and so forth, but in case it is, we're gonna try to come up with some alternatives in that situation, or we're gonna definitely provide enough room for everybody to spread out. So, with that said, I'll say good luck to everybody, and certainly if you have any questions, reach out to me and let us know, or contact our regional specialists, and we can certainly try to answer some questions for you.